is in Manchester. Dan, is a deal going to be done?
We don't know. The leaders here across the borough, across Greater Manchester, have been meeting this morning. They were trying to put together the figures that they thought were needed to support these measures. We don't know if they've managed to come up with a figure, if they've managed to put that to the government, and if that's now being considered. But the midday deadline has come and gone. There's been no announcement, so we assume there's been no agreement. And the way that the ultimatum was put last night was that if that agreement wasn't made with local leaders by midday, then the Community Secretary, Robert Jenrick, on behalf of the government, would put it to the Prime Minister for him to decide now whether to enforce these measures on Greater Manchester without a local agreement. So we assume those are the conversations that have been going on this morning, but no conclusion yet. We assume now that that position will be put back to Boris Johnson for him to decide what the next step is. But make no mistake, these are delicate next moves. Nobody wanted measures to be imposed on a city by a government, especially not with the strength of feeling that's built up here in Manchester over the last 10 days or so as these discussions have gone on and then broken down. It's been acrimonious. There have been suggestions that the government hasn't negotiated fairly in this, so I think careful next steps being considered. We're all waiting to see. There are people outside the library here waiting to see if there's going to be any sort of announcement on the next way ahead. Serious questions here about liberty, about health, about how we keep people safe, not just from the virus, but from its wider impacts, what sort of support there will be. This is a big test of who makes these decisions and how best we make sure that the rules are followed.
Just briefly, we're hearing a figure of £75 million being the one that will bring Andy Burnham and other leaders in the region to the table to say yes.
Frankly, we've heard all sorts of figures bandied around in the tens of millions, up to 100 million. Local leaders wouldn't be drawn on that this morning. They said there's too much up in the air. It all depends what the measures are, how much of an impact they have, how many workers are affected and how long that all lasts. If they're looking at a 4-week lockdown, restrictions that were put in place like in Liverpool last week, then perhaps a lower figure would tide them through to see how things go. But if we're talking about much longer disruption, perhaps through the winter, then they say much bigger figures are needed, not just to look after those staff, but to also make sure that there are enough teams in place to enforce the tighter rules and to make sure that there's enough capacity for test and trace to support that effort to try to drive the case numbers down here.
Dan Johnson, thank you very much.